So, ladies and gentlemen, let's kick off this hour by talking about privacy, shall we? Let's talk about privacy, or to be more accurate, let's talk about what's left of it, which sadly and frighteningly isn't very much. We have a couple of fairly big privacy stories here. So, for starters, ladies and gentlemen, the ACLU has obtained some new government documents which show that the Department of Justice and the FBI continue to not believe that they need to get a warrant to read your emails and your Facebook private messages and your chats and your private tweets, your direct messages on Twitter. I say they continue to believe that because, frankly, we've actually known for a while that the FBI already believed this. It's actually in their operations guide from years past. It's in like the 2008 and 2009 guidebooks, I believe, that where they claimed that the FBI only needed to get a warrant for electronic communications if your email or electronic communications were unopened and it was less than 180 days old. That's it. That's all they think. If you've opened your email, the FBI thinks that they can just go ahead and read it without a warrant. Or if it's been over 180 days and you never opened it, the FBI also thinks in that circumstance they can also read it without a warrant. That was what was in their guidebooks. And again, this is a handbook from years past, which the handbooks were actually obtained again through Freedom of Information Act requests, through lawsuits. It's not like the FBI just posted this online and said, hey, we think we can read your emails whenever we feel like it. This is something that we had to pry out of the FBI. So what supposedly changed was that in 2010, there was a lawsuit in the Sixth Circuit Court. And the judge ruled that, in the lawsuit, that the government must obtain a warrant when getting emails and electronic communications from internet service providers. So here's the deal. So the ACLU actually found that court ruling, that specific court ruling, which was the correct court ruling, that ruling, again, that ruling is obvious if you believe in the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. If some of you don't remember what the Fourth Amendment is, the Fourth Amendment is the one that says, quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. End quote. That is the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. It is the get a warrant clause. It is the probable cause clause. How do you like that? The probable cause clause. It's a foundation of of our democracy, of how we, supposedly are supposed to live in this society where, the police need to get a warrant. That is the foundation of one of our freedoms, core freedoms here. So the Sixth Circuit court ruling, it's an obvious ruling, again, gaining access to someone's private email without a warrant, without probable cause, is clearly and obviously an unreasonable search. It is. It's literally like police sneaking into your house late at night and, reading your diary, if you still have a diary, or reading your private letters. Again, technically, it's been ruled that they are not allowed to do that without a warrant and without probable cause. However, the feds and the Department of Justice do in fact think that your emails and electronic communications are fair game. And so there was a lawsuit, and the Sixth Circuit Court said, no, you cannot do that. You cannot get this communication without a warrant and without probable cause. It is unconstitutional. So here's where it gets complicated, okay? So apparently the scope of this case was narrow. So technically, the ruling in this specific case only applied to the 4 states that are in the Sixth Circuit. And again, even though it is obvious, and it should be obvious to anyone at all, that that the FBI going and looking through private emails without a warrant, it should be obvious that it's unconstitutional. It is unconstitutional. There is no clearer, there's no way you can look at this and say it's not unconstitutional, even though the feds do, but still, the ruling only applied to the Sixth Circuit. So the ACLU, being the badasses that they are, realized that fact, and so they filed additional Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA requests, after this ruling to see how the FBI and other circuits followed suit. And that brings us up to the news that came out this week. And I regret to inform you, the news is bad news. So let's start specifically with the FBI. So the ACLU was able to get, through a FOIA request, an updated FBI guidebook on this matter. And I know you're shocked. You're going to be shocked to hear this. The FBI rule actually has not changed at all. The FBI still does believe that it can get your email without a warrant if you opened it or if it's more than 6 months old. So apparently, this court ruling that happened in 2010, almost over 2.5 years ago, that court decision hasn't changed the FBI's policy at all. And that's pretty messed up. One, it's unconstitutional to begin with, and then here you have a circuit court saying that this is unconstitutional, and the FBI just says, screw you, we're going to keep doing it. So the FBI is continuing to do warrantless email searches. It also appears that the Department of Justice, the DOJ, also doesn't think that a warrant is needed either. So reading from a report on CNET, the ACLU FOIA request found, quote, the U.S. Attorney for Manhattan circulated internal instructions, for instance, saying a subpoena, a piece of paper signed by a prosecutor, not a judge, is sufficient to obtain nearly all records from an ISP. And the U.S. Attorney in Houston recently obtained the contents of stored communications from an unnamed internet service provider without securing a warrant signed by a judge first. End quote. So it's not just the FBI. It is not just the FBI. This is, we have instances in Manhattan. We have instances in Houston. This is happening all around the country. The ACL, they actually found that a couple districts were actually getting warrants, supposedly, but the majority are not. So again, this also comes after last month when the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, also said that they don't even need a warrant to read your email. This is messed up, folks. This is really messed up. And what's frightening, what's more frightening about all this is literally, again, how much of these rules and laws, air quotes around laws, right? How much of these laws are being written and implemented entirely in secret. Kevin Gostola at Firedog Lake actually reports that the Justice Department provided 500 pages for the ACLU's FOIA request. They gave them 500 pages, and they gave them 500 pages, but they reportedly withheld 6,000 pages on the subject. That's right. 6,000 pages were withheld because I don't know, because apparently the Justice Department doesn't think we need to know when and how our government can warrantlessly spy on our communications. They don't think we need to know. They just don't want us to know. I mean, that's it. They just don't want us to know. If they wanted us to know, they would let us know. They wouldn't be doing this behind closed doors. They wouldn't be doing this in secret. They are doing it because they do not want us to know. Speaking of what other things they don't want us to know, a former FBI agent, a man named Tim Clemente, was on CNN talking to Aaron Burnett about how the wife of the first Boston Marathon bomber about how she is supposedly refusing to cooperate with investigators. And they were having this big discussion about voicemails, and Aaron Burnett asks about voicemails, and the response that this former FBI agent gives on Aaron Burnett's show is something that's also very, very frightening, and I'm going to let you take a listen to it now. Take a listen. This is Tim Clement on Aaron Burnett's show on CNN.
And Tim, is there any way, now I guess it was a voicemail, they could try to get the phone companies to give that up at this point, but if it's not a voicemail, it's just a conversation. There's no way they actually can find out what happened, right? Unless she tells them.
No, there is a way. We certainly have ways in national security investigations to find out exactly what was said in that conversation. It's not necessarily something that the FBI is going to want to present in court, but it may help lead the investigation and or lead to questioning of her.
So somewhere it's being digitized, or they can actually get that. Because people were saying, look, that would be possible. It's pretty incredible what you're saying.
No, welcome to America. All of that stuff is being captured as we speak, whether we know it or like it or not.
Welcome to America. Welcome to America, land of the free and the home of all your phone calls being recorded. Look, and I don't care if we know it or like it or not, but it's happening, people. It's happening. Too bad. We don't care if it's illegal. We don't care if we can't use it because it's inadmissible. We're recording anyway. Get used to it. It's happening. So we're going to get into this. We're going to get into this for real. But just to make sure this wasn't a slip of the tongue, CNN actually had this former FBI agent back on the next day to ask him again about what he said, and they had this following exchange. This is, again, Tim Clement on CNN. Take a listen.
Okay, let's turn our attention now to the phone call between Catherine Russell and her husband, Tamerlan Tsarnaev. You said something very interesting on Aaron Burnett's show last night. You said that if Catherine Russell does not divulge the contents of this phone call, that the FBI had other methods finding out what was said. What did you mean by that?
Well, on the national security side of the house, in the federal government, we have assets. There's lots of assets at our disposal throughout the intelligence community, and also not just domestically but overseas. Those assets allow us to gain information and intelligence on things that we can't use ordinarily in a criminal investigation, but are used for major terrorism investigations or counterintelligence investigations.
And you're not talking about a voicemail, right? What are you talking about exactly?
I'm talking about all digital communications there's a way to look at digital communications in the past. And I can't go into detail of how that's done or what's done, but I can tell you that no digital communication is secure. And so these communications will be found out. The conversation will be known. And it's just a question of whether or not Catherine Russell decides to own up to what was said prior to that information being known or after the fact. And it'll be unfortunate for her if she doesn't own up to it completely and fully, because the facts of this case, the facts of her involvement and communication with her husband will be known.
The facts of a phone conversation she made with someone before either of them were a suspect in a criminal investigation will be known. It will be known. You heard him. You heard him, folks. No digital communication is secure, and phone conversations are now digital communications. So according to this former FBI agent, every single phone call is being recorded and stored by our government. And we've talked a little bit about this before on the show with the ACLU's Cade Crockford. This program was originally called the Total Information Awareness Program, but we don't normally get something like this discussed on CNN, or just this guy just sort of blatantly bragging about it. It is disturbing stuff. This is chilling stuff. So let's kind of discuss the big picture, the big idea about this here. So let me ask you guys some questions. Are you comfortable with every single solitary phone call you've ever made being recorded? Are you comfortable with every phone call you've ever made being recorded and the government having access to it whenever they feel like it? Are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with every single solitary email that you've ever written? Every single solitary chat that you've ever taken place with? Every single solitary Facebook message? Every single solitary direct tweet? Are you comfortable with the government storing and having access to all of that without a warrant? Are you? Well, like that former FBI agent said, welcome to America. I mean, it brings back the quote. I remember Senator Ron Wyden said Americans would be stunned if we knew the full extent that our government was spying on us. Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. The government is recording every single solitary phone call. Does that stun you? Does that stun you? Does every single phone call being recorded and stored, does that stun you? If it doesn't, do you care about privacy at all? Is there anything you've ever said in an email? Is there anything you've ever said in a phone conversation that you would not want to be made public? Is there anything at all? Is there a conversation you had? Is there an indiscretion you had? Was there an embarrassing purchase you made? Is there some embarrassing habit that you have? Is there anything in your life at all that you would rather people not know? Is there anything that you've ever done or anything you've ever said or written that you would not want your employer to know? Is there anything in any of those realms that you would not want your neighbor to know? Have you ever said, written, recorded anything at all that you wouldn't want your parents to know? Then you should care about the fact that the government is recording all of your communications. Obviously you should care. And look, you should care even if you are personally a squeaky clean, wonderful Ned Flanders type of person. Everything you do is great. You're just perfectly happy with everyone knowing every aspect of your private life. You're fine with them knowing everything. You might as well, you can go ahead and hand over your email password. You can hand over your voicemail password because you're perfectly happy. If you're that person who thinks, I'm not doing anything wrong, so I'm fine with them having all this communication, I gotta tell you something. You need to care too. You need to care too, even if you are the most squeaky damn clean person on the planet Earth who's perfect and doesn't care if anyone knows your business. You need to care. You want to know why? Because not everyone is like you. And I know if you think that you probably judge people on a regular basis and you're like, oh, of course people aren't as good as me. But look, not everyone is like you. And that actually sets this up for abuse and corruption. Let me explain. If all this information is being recorded, if all of this information is being stored, and this information can be accessed easily, those who are not as pure as you are vulnerable to blackmail. They are vulnerable to blackmail. And maybe you'll just say, well, maybe they should do the right thing and not do the things they're embarrassed about. Okay, fine. But you know what? We don't live in that world. Let's just go off in a little hypothetical land here. This is just a hypothetical thing. I'm not trying to go all Alex Jones on you people, but let's just have a hypothetical conversation on this. So say for example, a politician cheated on their spouse, and say there's emails with that politician and the mistress. There's emails with the politician. There's phone calls with the politician and the mistress. They're talking dirty back and forth to each other. And it's not a voicemail. This is not anything. This is they did phone sex together. They had this conversation with the politician and their mistress. So say those communications fell into the hands of someone who, wanted a certain bill passed. And I'm not even going to say Democrat, Republican, I'm not even going to go there. Say it fell into the hands of a agency that wanted funding for spying increased. Maybe they wanted money for contracts and contractors to build the next generation of recording and storing all communications. Look, it's hypothetical land here, right? But But the simple truth, the honest truth of this is, if people have no privacy, then people have no freedom. They have no freedom. Trust me, even if you're squeaky clean, you do not want to live in that world. And if we believe this former FBI agent, the frightening thing is, I think that we already are living in that world. We'll be right back.